Welcome to Naked Spirituality, a video blog series of sacred attention therapy and the Center for Human Awakening. My name is Rob Meager. For more information about sacred attention therapy, the Center for Human Awakening, and our video blog series, please visit our website at www.centerforhumanawakening.com. And center is spelled C-E-N-T-E-R. These video blogs support one of the Center's core activities, which is collaboration and partnership with individuals, communities, and healing centers practicing personal growth and spiritual development. And our guest today is Nancy Ouellet, and we will be talking with Nancy about her new book, Finding the Stairway to Heaven. And I'd now like to bring Nancy on screen. And Nancy, I'll welcome you to our video blog series. Thanks so much for being with me today.
You're very welcome. I'm very pleased to be here.
I'm looking forward to speaking with you about your new book, of which the title is Finding the Stairway to Heaven. The subtitle, A Mother's Story Turning Tragedy into Hope and Inspiration. And I'd like to begin by asking, are you willing to share the story
Absolutely.
that is the hope and inspiration for those that might read the book?
Absolutely. That's why I wrote it. So I'm very open to sharing the story. And if you'd like, I can begin now.
Please do, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, this is a copy of the book.
Okay.
And I came upon that title about 2 years before the death of my daughter. At the time, I had no idea what was going to go in the book, but I had just begun meditating. And it was like the sky opened up and I had this inspiration that I was going to write a book. I had no idea what was going to go in it, but I knew the title. And the reason that I was meditating and very much trying to go inwards was because of the trauma that I had been experiencing in my life. First of all, my daughter Jasmine Kavanaugh, when I first had her, I was overcome. When I first became pregnant, I was overcome with these feelings of sadness, not because I was pregnant, but because I knew this child was going to bring me great sorrow and sadness. I'm a very intuitive person and have always been. I never really was completely connected into being spiritually awakened. I just always had this knowingness about me. And I knew it the moment that I conceived that this child was going to bring me great sadness. And unfortunately, her life was not that easy with us because I was codependent. I came from a background of an alcoholic father and was the middle child of 7 others. And in that environment, I ended up becoming, as I said, very codependent, very needy, always looking towards others to find my personal worth, never thinking I was good enough, very low self-esteem. So she had a mother who was dysfunctional, and her father had drug addiction issues, so he was dysfunctional as well. As she got older, we discovered that she had borderline personality disorder. And for those of you who aren't familiar with borderline personality disorder, there's a disconnect in the way that they relate to the world. Very highly emotional, very sensitive, very difficult to get along with other people because they're very paranoid about what others are thinking about them. It causes them to have great anxiety. As a result, she ended up turning towards drugs at a very early age. And it certainly didn't help that, my husband and I at the time, before she turned to drugs, kind of set that stage for her. We were both very dysfunctional. I began recovery shortly after she started becoming dysfunctional and started adult children of alcoholics and CODA and Al-Anon and those kinds of 12-step groups, and began to start to spiritually awaken. But she was already in a state of her borderline personality, and it continued to just get worse and worse. I ended up leaving her father, and she had a child. That child, her name was Angel, beautiful name, but she was unable to take care of her. My husband Charlie and I ended up becoming her parents, Angel's parents. So as grandparents, this my new husband Charlie became responsible for Angel, and we had to distance ourselves from my daughter Jasmine because she was totally into the drug scene. At one point she was on the streets, and it continued to escalate. At one point she held up some people in Moncton, New Brunswick with a syringe looking for money for drugs, and she ended up being in prison for 4 years. That story goes, it gets worse, except until about 5 years ago, I retired, and I lived that first year enjoying retirement, going away with my husband. And then all of a sudden it started to come to me, is this all there is? After a year worth of doing that, I was starting to question, is this all there is to retirement? Is this all there is to life? And I started to look inwards. And it was about that time that I started meditating, because that's the message that came to me when I was starting to pray to God, what do you want me to do? My life is in a turmoil right now. My husband's brother had been murdered a few years previous. We had just lost our daughter-in-law to a suicide. And I was wondering, what is life all about? And it was like this message came out of the sky, you need to meditate. And so I began meditating. And at that point, I had started doing more spiritual work, started reading everything I could get my hands on. And I realized through one of the meditations I did, a Deepak and Chopra meditation on relationships, that I needed to heal the relationship with my daughter. So I started to reach out to her. She was at the time in a mental institution. And during the time she was in the mental institution, I began sharing with her all this wonderful goodness that I was learning from my awakening, my meditating, the books that I was reading. I was reading The Course in Miracles. I was reading Marianne Williamson, Return to Love, and I was reading Neil Donald Walsh, and I read every book that Wayne Dyer's written. And I was just immersing myself. That's the type of person I am. I got to know everything about it. And I was starting to share that with her, and she was beginning to get it. But she was in an enclosed environment. And when she came back out, because she did a few years later, we continued the journey together of healing. I had become a Reiki master and was helping her with some healing. But because of her borderline personality disorder, she just wasn't getting it. She couldn't hold on to the concepts. She would get it for the time I had her in the room. But when she was on her own, she just wasn't getting it. Long story short, she tried really hard, but became very disillusioned when she tried to find work, and ended up finding out because of her criminal record she wasn't hireable. So she turned back to drugs. And it was not very long before that we found that she had overdosed. And after grieving her loss, it took me, about half a year to get to a point where I realized I was ready to write this book. It was time. And I came to some very wonderful awarenesses that she was in my life for a reason, to prepare me to write this book. So I'll give you a chance to ask me some questions.
First of all, thank you for that heartfelt story. It's received so beautifully. So thank you for sharing it with us, because it's important background to understand, I think, what the book shares. And again, the title of the book, Finding the Stairway to Heaven, my understanding is the essence of the book may be, and I'm quoting here actually from the book spine, a 10-step process that will help you to understand your true essence as a spiritual being and how to develop your higher consciousness and your connection to God. And I was hoping, Nancy, that you would be able to walk us through, if ever so briefly, of that 10-step process, perhaps spending a minute or two on each of the steps.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we have to come to a recognition or an awareness that you are more than this physical body that you have. I really believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, not the other way around. Most people in this world today believe that this duality that we live in, all this physicality, is what we are. And our ego plays a great part in that. We have to learn that we are spirit and begin to live from that spirit part of ourselves. And there in the first chapter, I do go over what it's like to be in your ego personality versus what it's like to be in your spiritual side, so that you can tell how you're operating most of the time. For example, fear versus love. And I describe those in the book. So there's quite an in-depth section on that. And you need to begin to identify what your behaviors normally are, and then try to move yourself to your spiritual self. The second step is separation and atonement. And what that tells us, and I've just got a little cheat sheet here, I hope you don't mind, because I'm going to be honest, I haven't got it all memorized. Maybe in another year I'll have it all memorized, but the words that I want to share, I want to make sure that I share them properly. As spiritual beings, we are not separate from God. And this is shared under the Course in Miracles. And I also love Neil Donald Walsh's explanation. A lot of people believe that God's over here and we're here, that we're separate. But I don't believe that. I believe that within each one of us is a spark of God, a spark of that divinity. And because we have that spark within us, we are also divine and limitless and so powerful that we are capable of moving mountains. So if you can recognize that you have within you a touch of God, and you just need to connect to it to tap into all that wonderfulness, how wonderful, we could all be if we all could, and we could all recognize that within each other, right? The next step is truth versus illusion. And the fact is that most people in the world today are living from a place where they think they're not good enough. They think they're flawed. They don't look good enough. They haven't got the right job. They haven't got the right wife or husband. There's problems with their children. There's problems, everywhere. All they see is lack. And what you need to come to understand and be aware of is that you were created by God. You are a spark of God. And God does not make mistakes. You are perfect in your imperfections, in your flaws. He made you that way for a reason. There is something in your life that you are meant to do, and because of who you are and with all your flaws, you will achieve that if you keep following the right path. So these are very short synopsis. Obviously, there's a chapter on each of these. The next step, which is step 4, is faith is believing. And obviously, I think I'm not the first one to say this, but your beliefs will impact your attitude. So your beliefs, whether they're true or false, which is what I just talked about, right? The illusion that you're not good enough, you really are good enough. If you believe that you aren't good enough, well, that's going to affect your attitudes. It's going to affect your feelings and your behaviors. So it's very important to learn, because you are the spark of God, that you need to believe this and to have faith that the statement's true and that it will direct your thoughts. So if you begin to believe that you are the spark of God, you will start to see, and you have faith, because we have to start off with faith, because belief, we've learned from our past experiences a certain belief system. So in order to change that, many of us, and I learned this in my 12-step programs, you have to act as if first. You have to have faith. But if you begin to have this faith, you will begin to notice God working in your life. And that faith will turn into belief, so that you can change your thoughts, because your thoughts will change your experience and your reality. The next step is step 5. All you need is love. And this is the one basic truth in life, is that we are all love. That is who we are. If we are a spark of God, we are of God, and God is love. I don't think that there's many religions in the world or spiritual belief systems in the world that wouldn't agree with that. He has kindness, compassion, love, and mercy. So what we need to do is not only remember that of our higher power, or who we believe in as God, but also of ourselves, because we, as that spark of God, need to love ourselves. We need to begin with ourselves. A lot of people are looking for love outside of themselves. You cannot find love until you love the true love, until you learn to love yourself. So this chapter, and Deepak Chopra, Oprah talks, I keep saying that, Deepak Chopra talks about it quite a bit. And Louise Hay, was the one who began the whole process of learning to love yourself. But I came up with my own step system on how to proceed to love yourself, and action steps you can take every day. So that's very key on the journey. The next step is step 6. Giving is receiving. And so basically what I'm saying there is that what you put out to others and the universe is what will come back to you. So you can't give away what you don't have. So if you want love in your life, you have to give it away. If you want kindness in your love, you have to be kind. You want mercy, you have to be merciful. So if you can just recognize this storehouse of gifts that we have within us that we can share with other beings, that can come back to us. We just need to recognize that it's there and start being that individual from our spiritual self. And it will start to come back to us in beautiful gifts, loving gifts that God will give to us. Step 7, living in the here and now. I'm not the first person to talk about this. Eckhart Tolle has several books on the topic. But as spiritual beings having a human experience, you came to experience your true selves, living in an awakened life aligned with God. And what I talk about in the book is that it is much easier to be aligned with God when you're in the present state, because a lot of people are concentrating on, they're worrying about what happened yesterday or last year or 20 years ago, or they're thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow or next year or far into the future, when they retire. And very few people have learned how to concentrate on the moments that they're in. Instead of worrying, it's just like this interview today. I could be worrying about what's going to be happening with the results of this, but I made a choice, a decision to be fully present in this moment with you, to talk from myself, from my higher being. And so all the fear disappears with that. Being in the present moment, you are so much of who you truly are, your divine spirit. And that is how you will connect with your higher power. Finding your true life's purpose is step 8. Once you have begun to delve into these steps and start to connect with your source, your higher power, God, whatever way you'd like to refer to the universal energy, you're going to start to ask yourself the questions, well, what is my purpose here? And if you keep looking, if you keep meditating, if you keep searching, if you keep following your spiritual self, you will be led. Your spiritual self will lead you. Step 9, learn, heal, and teach. So just continuing the process. Once you've figured out what you believe your life purpose is, it's like this book. As I said, 2 years before I started writing it, I had no idea what I was going to put in the pages. My spiritual self told me what the chapters were going to be. I had all the chapter titles outlined. I didn't have a clue what was going in them. But I said, okay, I guess I have to learn all of that. So I began to study and read and absorb it all. And I did that the few years before my daughter passed away. And once she passed, I knew, oh, this is book going to be dedicated to her. And I'm going to write about all the stuff I learned in the past few years. And so I learned it. Then this part I'm doing now it's a healing process. People who are learning who they are need to identify problems they have in their psyche, their mental, their physical, their spiritual parts of their body, and begin to heal that. So there's a whole section on, how you can go about doing that, energy healing versus, like acupuncture, Reiki, reflexology. There's a whole list of things that you can do. Then once you've learned and you've healed, you're going to be ready to start sharing this message with the rest of the world. So to teach others what you've learned, this joy. So the last step is think, believe, act, and create. This is step 10. So just to reiterate that your thoughts create your reality because your mind is a powerful manifester. And only when your true spiritual self is managing your thoughts, words, and your actions will you be able to manifest to your greatest potential. So your ultimate purpose is to keep growing and moving forward, creating again and again, connecting to God and figuring out what that is, that creation that you're supposed to be developing. And for me, it was this book, and to begin to share the message. For me, that was what it was. And it may not be that, it doesn't have to be something like that, writing a book. It can be fairly simple, and it could be, being a waitress in a restaurant. If you have joy from that and you bring joy to people, that could be, what your purpose is. But when you receive the guidance that comes to you, it'll come to you in many forms. You need to believe that it's real and have faith that it is God using his universal guidance systems in reply to your constant, querying to give you that guidance. And then you'll be able to have the thoughts, you'll believe it, and you'll be able to take action and create something that's divinely inspired that you can share with the rest of humanity.
So beautifully shared, Nancy.
Thank you.
Is it available on Amazon?
Yes, it is. Amazon.ca and Amazon.com. It's also available on Kobo and on Kindle.
Okay.
Barnes and Noble, Chapters.
All of the options.
All the options. The only thing is the physical books, the hardcover and these paperback.
Yep.
You can't get them on the Canadian website yet. You can only get them through Amazon.com.
Okay.
So it's a little annoying because when I created the book and I had tellwell.ca help me publish it, I believed that it was going to be available that way on Amazon.ca, but the shipping cost can be an issue if you don't have Prime.
Yep.
So, but I have copies as well. I have some that were produced in Canada. Unfortunately, once again, shipping them to people is a problem, but I have been going out and making them available and around the Maritimes. I'm going to Moncton on April the 7th.
Okay.
And I'm going to be in St. Andrews on April the 14th. So. Okay.
So it's available on certainly Amazon and the other very popular today means to get the book.
That's right.
Nancy, if someone wanted to reach out to you directly, ask you some questions, speak with you more perhaps about your book, how would they do so? Is there an email address or a website you can share?
Well, I'm putting this up because if I say it, I know if it's like me. Can you see that? Can
I
you?
can. It's perfect. It's perfect.
It just, actually, if you go on Google and you just type my name, author,
Okay.
it'll bring that website up, but it's just myname.com.
Beautiful.
No basis. And, you know, I have a connection there. Excuse me. You can, you'll see my blog, but there's also a subscription service that you can register for. There's also a way to get in touch with me by email.
All right.
Also, if you want to join my Facebook group, I have a Facebook group. It's open to the public. It's called Finding the Stairway to Heaven by Nancy Ouellet.
Okay.
Real creative.
And now you mentioned that people can get in touch with you through your website, but is there an email address that they can reach out to you directly by email?
Yeah, you can reach me at my, that's real hard to remember too. It's nancy.ouellet@me.com.
Wonderful. Nancy, we'll make sure that the website address and the email address are in the scrolling credits at the end.
Wonderful.
Nancy, thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste for your beautiful story, for sharing it with us, as well as the essence of your book, and all love and blessings to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.